There's nowhere to put my leg, you know? I need like a foot kickstand thing. All right, so welcome to the first episode of CGQ Memories. And I kind of explained this in the Q&A video on the other channel a while, whenever I made that. Well, I made it like 5 minutes ago, but I don't know when I'm uploading them. So, so the premise behind this, what I hope to be a series of videos, is basically just going to be me sort of chronologically stepping through all the games that I played, as a kid and up until I get tired of talking about them. I'm not going to talk about modern games ever, but just, the games that I had as a kid, and a teenager, and even as a young adult. And so sort of the idea is that I will start off the show actually sitting right here and just talking about my memories of each particular game and how I was introduced to it, and I don't know, anything else I want to talk about from that period of time in my childhood that hopefully some of you guys can relate to. And hopefully me, talking nostalgically about my childhood will get you guys thinking nostalgically about your own. And then that would be followed up by me playing the game for a little while and maybe talking more about my thoughts about the game or what I thought about it then or just whatever. So I guess at that point it would kind of turn into a Let's Play. Or whatever, and I would just play it until I either got tired of playing it or just didn't think I had anything interesting to say about it anymore. So in this first episode, we're actually not going to do that because I want to just sort of go through my gaming prehistory, by which I mean just what led up to me getting my first home console. So what other games I saw as a kid and time I spent in the arcade and whatnot, and just sort of give a frame of reference to everything else I'm going to talk about in this series, just going forward. So I'll try to make it brief. I know I talk too much. So I was born in 1977, so I'm turning 40 this year. So I was born the same year that the Atari 2600 came out. My first gaming memories, though, are from, I want to say I was in first grade. And I don't know the order in which these things happened, but, obviously during that time, arcade games were huge. This would have been like, 1983, 82, 83, 84 was like, kindergarten, first grade, second grade for me. And back then you couldn't go anywhere without running into like an arcade machine. Like everybody had an arcade machine, and like, you go to any restaurant and there'd be an arcade machine in like the waiting area, or you went to the movies and there was like multiple arcade machines out in the lobby. You went to like the car wash, and while you were waiting to get your car washed, you'd be inside, playing Space Invaders or something. So clearly, I had some exposure to video games, to arcade games at that time, and I remember, maybe playing Pac-Man at a pizza parlor or something when I was a kid, but I don't have like a strong memory of when that was. But the two things I do have a strong memory of are living in a house where my next door neighbor had a cocktail machine that the game was like Combat. I think it was just called Tank, and it was like 2-player only. And so me and his daughter would play the game together. We were both like 6 years old or something, and we'd sit there and play, this Tank. It was exactly like Combat. It was probably made by Atari. I have to go look it up. I'm not really sure, but I remember that. And then more importantly, I remember the first home console that I ever played. And it belonged to my best friend from first grade until like 7th grade was this kid named Jonathan. And he's going to come up a lot for the next several episodes because, one of the big things that Jonathan and I did together was play video games. And anyway, so first grade, I used to go over to his house every day after school. And he had an Atari 5200, which, was not the most common system back then. Like everybody had a 2600, but he had a 5200. And the two games I remember playing over at his house all the time, and he had more than that, but the two games I really remember are Space Invaders and Cubert, because he used to play those a lot. And I mean, I'd play a little bit, but my memories of going over to Jonathan's house always they really center around me watching him play. And that's not to say that he didn't let me have a turn, but it's just when I think back to hanging out at Jonathan's house, it was mostly like him playing games and me watching. But it's not like I was upset about it or like he wasn't willing to share. It was just I was at his house, but I enjoyed watching him play. You know, he always had a lot of cool games, so I enjoyed that. But that was my first exposure to like a home video game console. And then when I was like halfway through second grade, we moved. I guess it's important to note my parents were divorced. My parents actually, I have no memory of my parents ever even being together. My dad moved out when I was like 2 years old or something, but he still lived in the same city. And so I just had like a room in both houses. You know, I'd spend like, you know, part of the week with my mom and I'd spend part of the week with my dad. And then halfway through second grade, my dad got a job in in Sacramento. That's where, you know, which was 3 hours away from where I grew up. And so I went with him. Not because I chose one over the other. It was just like that's what my parents decided, you're going to go with your dad up to the Sacramento area. And so I had to leave, you know, my friends and everything, and I had to leave Jonathan for a while. Although I would always, anytime I'd come back and visit my mom, I'd go visit Jonathan because he lived like right down the street. But that is where, so this is where my biggest gaming memory, or you know, in the prehistory that we're calling, happened. So if anybody grew up in this area, Sacramento area, they'll know what I'm talking about. But we moved to this small town called Cameron Park. And Cameron Park was on, well, it's still there, is on Highway 50, which goes between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. And so that's a lot of people drive up there, especially in the wintertime, because all the ski resorts are above Lake Tahoe. I mean, they had the Olympics. That's where Squaw Valley is, right? That's where they had the Olympics there in like, I don't know when. But so Cameron Park is right on Highway 50, and there was this place in Cameron Park called Sam's Town. And I'll put up, I found some pictures online, a few. I'll put them up, but I'll describe Sam's Town to you. It was just this big rectangular building, but they'd put this facade on it so that it looked like something from the Old West. So where this is, Cameron Park, is very close to where they first discovered gold in the 1840s. So all these little towns that are up there in the mountains, like between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe, most of them trace their roots back to the gold rush. And a lot of them are touristy now, and so they sort of play up the gold rush angle. And that's kind of what Sam's Town was doing. And it was kind of like this, they went for some sort of like Hofbrau theme, like the mascot Sam was like the sort of fat guy with like a red shirt that had like, I don't know what they used to do back then, like you'd see card dealers in like old West movies would put these tie things around their sleeve. I don't know what that was for. And he always had like this long white apron. He had this big handlebar mustache, and he was holding, he was a cartoon character, and he was holding like a big beer mug in his hand with a big head on it, you know. And like I said, it was done up like something out of the Wild West. And you'd come up to the main entrance, and outside the main entrance, I don't know where they got it, but they actually had like the prison wagon or whatever from Planet of the Apes, like, you know, the movie prop. They had that out front with like a plaque on it or whatever. But anyway, you'd walk in the main entrance, and you were in a sports bar. But it was kind of done up in sort of a Old West kind of way. They had sort of those old wooden table and chairs that you would expect to see in like an Old West saloon. But then they had like a big projection TV, because you'd go there to watch, you know, football or whatever. And one of the things I remember about that bar, because you had to walk through the bar to get to what I'm getting to. The whole floor was covered in sawdust. Just, I guess that was the look they were going for. I don't really know. And then they would serve peanuts that were still in the shell, and they would serve them in those wooden bowls that I used to always see those bowls like at pizza parlors. Those would be like the salad bowls. Like they were wood, but it was like weaved wood. I don't know how to explain it really. And then it had lacquer all over it or whatever. But anyway, they would give you like a huge bowl of peanuts. And they would tell you like it was just, you know, or you would just know, like you would shell the peanuts and then just throw the shells on the floor. So the floor was always covered in sawdust and peanut shells or whatever. But the kids weren't really allowed to hang out in there because it was a bar. I mean, they had food, but it was just like, There was never kids hanging out in the bar, but I never wanted to hang out in the bar, and here's why. So you would keep walking through the bar, and you'd go through these big doors, and what took up most, because I mean the bar was maybe like 20 feet by 20 feet. It was like bar sized, and it was a pretty big. Sam's Town was a big building, because you'd walk through the bar into this gigantic room with high ceilings, and it was a humongous video arcade. And this would have been 1984 is when we moved up there. And I mean, the arcades were the place to be in 1984. And this place, like, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that they had like every game. Like, you'd never walk in there and be like, oh, they don't have whatever, because they did. But on top of that, they had like other stuff. Like, I remember when the movie Big came out. What was that? I don't know, 88 or 89. I don't know when it came out. They had like the Zoltar machine, right? It was that mechanical fortune teller. Sam's Town had like 3 of those. They had like one that looked like Zoltar. They had one that was like some old gypsy lady, and I don't know what but they had these all lined up, and you could play those, and it would give you, a fortune. They had like the scale where you'd pay like a nickel and get on the scale and get a fortune. They had a bunch of those old Nickelodeon machines, and those were a little bit racy, because you'd stick like a dime or whatever in one, and it was this big cast iron thing that had like a thing for you to put your like a eye shield or something. I don't know what you call it. It's like the same thing that's on like a submarine periscope. And you'd stick the money in there, and you'd stick your face up to it, and you would turn this crank, and the crank was turning like it was a bunch of pictures that would flip through as you turned it, and so it would be animated. But it would be like, and these things were from like the 20s or something. So it was these black and white pictures, but it would be like a girl taking a bath or something, and she wouldn't be like topless. She'd have clothes, but maybe like a bra and panties or whatever passed for a bra and panties in the 1920s. And so you'd sit there, and when I was like, I would have been 7 and 8 years old, and so I'm sitting there cranking this thing like, whoa, that you don't even know what to do with that. You just know you like it, Anyway, so they had those, but those were kind of cool. But once you'd seen them, and then you didn't care anymore. 'Cause that's not why you were there. Because like I said, this place had like any game you could think of. They had a huge row of pinball machines. I didn't like pinball that much when I was a kid, just because I really sucked at it. But some of the games they had that I remember very vividly, they had Pole Position too, but it was the upright. But I used to play that one a lot. One of the big ones I remember they had was Spy Hunter, because they had the Spy Hunter cabinet that you actually got in and sat down. Like, I think all the Spy Hunter cabinets had the same steering wheel, but some of them were just the upright cabinets. But this was the one where you actually got in it, and it had like stereo speakers in it. And that was one of the big games I played. I remember they had Vanguard, they had Moon Patrol, they had Punch Out. I remember that. I was terrible at Punch Out, but I enjoyed playing it. Those are the big games, I think. Like I said, they must have had 40 or 50 at least arcade machines in there. And then one of the other things about that place that was really cool, so they had skee-ball. I mean, every arcade in America had skee-ball, right? But you'd play these skee-ball machines, and of course it would give you tickets, but like, they didn't have like the counter where you got like the cheap plastic crap, or like Chinese finger cuffs or stupid stuff like that. What they had was like this old-timey candy store. And it was actually in a room that was off of the arcade. You'd walk through these doors, and it looked like something out of like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Like, it had all the glass jars on shelves, and there were like jawbreakers of different sizes, and which one you were going to get would depend on how many tickets you had. I mean, they had jawbreakers. I don't know why they sold it. They had jawbreakers, and I'm sure a lot of you remember these. They were like the size of a baseball almost. Like, what were you supposed to do with that? But, for, I don't know, 10 tickets, 15 tickets, you could get like a jawbreaker that was like the size of a pinball or something, and that would last for a long time. So, and that was the only thing they had to spend tickets on. Like, you weren't getting like cheap toys. It was just like candy. And I think I always would go for the jawbreakers. But we lived there in Cameron Park for about a year, I think. But, sort of in my, when you're a kid, like a year is a really, really long time. Like, as an adult, a year is like nothing. A year is like a month. But when you're a kid, a year is like an eternity. And so even though we only lived there for a year, to me, it feels like it was a long time. And we used to go there pretty regularly because my parents would go hang out in the bar. and they would just give me a bunch of change, and I would go into the arcade, and I could just spend so much time in there. In fact, I got in trouble one time because we didn't live in town. We lived like out in the country, kind of. We were renting this house that was kind of like in the foothills. Well, I mean, Cameron Park's in the foothills, but I'm saying it was like miles away. And one time, because we lived there, so we lived there a year, and so I lived there during the summer between second and third grade. And one day I walked all the way to Sam's Town, and my parents didn't like that at all, because I was walking down like country roads, like windy country roads in the hills, just to get to Sam's Town, because I was bored, partially, and also partially just because Sam's Town was awesome. So why wouldn't I want to go there? But I mean, that place made a huge impression on me, as far as like that was the first time that I really started playing like video games in earnest, because before that, like I said, it was like playing Pac-Man while we were waiting for our table at a restaurant, or we'd go out for pizza and I would go I'd go play a game while we were waiting for the pizza to come to the table, or whatever. But that Sam's Town was like my first big exposure to playing like all the different arcade games that were out. And sadly, it would still be quite some time before I got a home game system. But to be honest, I think during this time, home game systems weren't really on my radar that much. I was playing Jonathan's Atari 5200 until he moved away, but I don't remember playing it and really thinking like, wow, I really want one of these, and even when I was playing arcade games at Sam's Town, I wasn't thinking like, I really want to be able to play these games at home. Maybe I was, and I don't remember. Or maybe I just knew there was no way I was getting a video game system. But the first rumblings of me getting a home video game system didn't really start until early 1987. And we're going to get to that in the next episode, where we are going to play our first game. So I hope you found this at least mildly interesting. Hopefully these will get better and more interesting when I actually have like stuff of substance to talk about. And then of course we'll play games, and then hopefully I'll get better at just sort of speaking off the cuff in front of the camera, because I don't think that's my strong suit. But I hope that you saw enough here that you'll stick with us. And if not, I'll upload other types of content to this channel as well. So thanks for checking it out, and I'll see you guys again soon.